Mr. Steve Holladay, and Steve is an old friend of mine from back in Freed Hardeman days many years ago, and so we appreciate getting the chance to see him. And Steve spent some time in youth ministry, and then from that field moved into more of a counseling profession, and now is the founder of Ultimate Escape, and that is an organization that he runs in which he does lots of counseling on issues related to purity and to sex addiction and to those types of areas. And he is filling a need that is, well, it's a glaring need in our society and within our church even, within the church at large, that people need to be willing to have the conversations that Steve is willing to have. And for sometimes those conversations are difficult, and they can be embarrassing, and they can be hard to instigate and hard to begin, but the conversations need to be had. And I told Steve last night I was very appreciative of what he's doing, and I think he needs to be in every church, and he agreed. But not every church is willing to have this conversation. I'm so proud of our elders here and leadership of our congregation that they're willing to engage this topic and bring Steve here to now for the third time to have this discussion or parts of this discussion. Steve has with him a special friend, Legend, and Legend is a certified therapy dog, and she's a part of his presentation, and not to be feared, but just as gentle as can be. So we're glad to have both of them here this morning.
Jason, Legend, come here, girl. Let's put you up here, right here, this way. Good girl. And down. Good girl. Down. There you go. That's your spot. Good morning. How many of you were not here for the sessions last night? Okay, that's a fair number. Let me give you the thimble introduction to the guy who's talking this morning. Background, as Jason shared, my background is youth ministry, and for the last 15 years I have been involved in this ministry, Ultimate Escape. We basically help families, individuals, and organizations address sexuality in a healthy way. So professionally, my training is in counseling, specifically around areas in sexuality, sexual addiction, sexual trauma, sexual identity, and I work only in that genre of issues. And then I also do speaking, and God has opened up doors way more than we ever anticipated. I thought, moved from North Carolina to go to school in Virginia. I thought, I'll move back to North Carolina. I might speak in a couple of different states. I just had a very small vision of what God was going to do through this ministry. And to date, I think we've been in 9 foreign countries and over half of the states in the United States. God has provided a lot of opportunity to share his vision for sexuality. And that has been a most interesting journey to be a part of, and very thankful for it. And I get to bump into friends from where our paths crossed back years ago very frequently. But this morning we're going to talk specifically about how do we talk to our kids about sex. How many, if you are under the age of 20, let me see a hand, kind of where we're at. Okay, there we go. So in the session today, I want you to do a mental report card. Just kind of a checklist, okay? And you don't have to share it. Now, it may be a really interesting conversation around lunch. Parents, if you want to ask your kids, okay, what grade did you give us? But I am asking you, if you're under the age of 20, just kind of keep a running checklist, and how well have your parents done in preparing you for this dialogue? Or what areas has there been no conversation? And maybe even at this point, so I'm 14, 15, 17, whatever, and if we've never had a conversation, it might feel really awkward at this point. Because I know there are some of you in here who are adults who your parents never said a word to you about sex. And at this point, you're thinking, I don't want to have that conversation now for certain. That'd be really weird now. But by the time we're done, hopefully everybody has an idea of whatever role you're in. So if you are not a child, like young child any longer, but you're more in the stage of life thinking, hey, when I get to be a parent, or now that I am a parent, or because I'm a grandparent, what voice do I have in the life of the young people that I'm involved in? Because whether you're a parent, a teacher, a mentor, a close friend, whatever, you have the opportunity to speak truth into the life of a young person. And that's really the goal of what we're looking at here, how to do that. So we have ready to go here. Our tagline with Ultimate Escape, can learn a lot about sex from and then fill in the blank. We had a lot of objects up here last night. The stage is more cleared for just this morning. But we're going to start off. It would help if the presenter turned the power on the thing in his hand. There we go. That works so much better. Okay. There are so many signs of unhealthy attitudes or behaviors around sexuality. Just a short snapshot here. 33% of females and 67% of males, ages 13 to 24, and that is a big age spread. I recognize it. One of my wish they had done a little different with the study here. 13 to 24 seek out pornography at least once a month. I don't know if you were already aware of that, if that looks like a lowball statistic to you. It certainly does to me, just from the conversations I have week in, week out with people, especially middle school, high school students. My anecdotal observation, and based on talking to youth ministers, is it's a lot higher number of our middle school and high school students than that right there. But it is not just guys, it is guys and girls. And if we look at behaviors, not just looking at porn, but if we look at sexting, and whether it's a sexualized picture or a full nude picture, sending, receiving sexual conversation, chat rooms, reading sexual stories online, if we start to pull in all of that behavior, I don't know that there's a way to quantify the number accurately, but it would be a huge percentage of young people are dealing with that. And that doesn't even get into sexual trauma, sexual abuse, unwanted sexual advances, and the high percentage there. So needless to say, our kids are growing up in a world that is very unhealthy when it comes to sexuality. So how do we help change that? How do we address healthy sexuality in that kind of a culture? Number one, begin early and be consistent. And that's where we learn a lot about sex from a sports car. So I've got my remote control car. I'm going to power it up here. And my goal is that it goes right down the center aisle and right out the doors in the back. So that's the direction I want it to go. So I've got the power on. I'm just going to set it down and point it in the right direction. So it is now pointed in the direction I want it to go, and we're going to send it off. Well, it didn't take long at all for that to get off course. Maybe I didn't do a very good job of telling it where I wanted it to go. So let me make sure we've got it pointed exactly where I want it to go, right down the middle aisle. And here we go again. Well, that still isn't going. We got to do something different. This obviously is not working. So this time, instead of just pointing it in the right direction, every time it gets off course, I'm going to make a course correction. So there we go, and needs a little course correction. But you get the idea. Every time it gets off course, and it's not going in a straight line by any stretch, but it's generally making it down the path there. Now, I don't know if I want to attempt to, can we do this? Oh, nope, I can't. Thank you. A little help from the back there. Okay. Nope, it's just going to, let me just make this much easier. Let me walk down here and just pick it up. It's trying to drive backwards. I don't even drive forward very well with this thing. Okay, so what does that have to do anything at all with sex? Well, I hope you're kind of jumping ahead of me here. Instead of having the conversation, let's think more of a series of conversations. In the traditional have the conversation, we're thinking, okay, when our kids get to be maybe dating age, we're probably thinking, by the time they're maybe 15, 16, we need to have a talk with them. Or we're sweating this thing. We've been sweating it for 16 years. But as the time gets close, we're really dreading it now. And so it's totally awkward. The kid is probably hiding under the covers, trying to just disappear because it's awkward for them too, because we've never talked to them about this before. Now understand, they have heard a ton as they've lived in this culture. They've heard a ton from friends, from the internet, from locker room, whatever. And now all of a sudden we're talking about something, but because we've never talked about it, it feels really shameful and dirty and wrong, and it just doesn't go well at all. In fact, one parent who shared that their 13-year-old son said it was the worst day ever when they had that conversation. Because they had never talked about it until after an Ultimate Escape presentation, and they decided they needed to. So instead of that approach, which just doesn't work very well. Let's start early. I'm going to recommend by age 3 to 4, we begin having conversations about body parts. We give body parts names. Every body part we have has a name. You have eyes, ears, toes, nose. You have a penis or a vagina. You have an arm, a leg. It's just that simple because there is no dirty part. But there are parts that are private that people don't need to see. And so we have this level of conversation beginning very early. And here to me is the huge benefit of that. Most memories don't start before age 3 or 4. So if we do that, then our child grows up and they never remember any awkward. They never remember a time when parents didn't talk to them openly about this part of life. And it's just normal. And if it's normal at 4 and 5 and 7, that means it's normal at 10 and 12 and 15 and 18. It's just normal. You have put yourself in the position of being the sexpert in your family. And so when kids hear something, it's normal to come home and ask questions about it. If they see something on the internet, it's normal to ask a question about it. Or to say, hey, Mom, I was doing homework, and this is what popped up. What should I do? And there's no need to hide it because you guys have talked about that before. And so things don't fall into this deep, dark hole of unmentionable, and there's not this aura about it because it's known. It's just... the blanks have been filled in. Jim Burns has written 2 books for little children. This one is God Made Your Body, and it's ages 3 to 5. This is How God Makes Babies, ages 6 to 9. And here's the great thing about the books. They do all the work. All you have to do is read the book. Sit down with my 3-year-old and we read the book. The graphics are great. It's a Christian worldview, so everything is put into God created, God designed, God made. Every part of your body, God made it. It's all good. But in the introduction in this book, here's what he writes. It's important to introduce children to the foundational theme that God created their body, and it's special. You begin laying out for them a healthy view of their body and the very basics of sexuality. You'll be establishing the trust that they can come to you when they're older and talk about these issues. Begin early and be consistent. I'm not saying we talk about it every day, but that we're consistently following up and we let our child's curiosity be largely the guide, that when they ask questions, there's no, oh, you need to go talk to your dad about that. Because in that we've just shut down, well, I'm not approachable, or there's something wrong with this. This is like, wow, that's such a bad thing. I can only talk to Dad about that. Again, it's not that we're meaning to communicate that, but when we start talking in hushed tones or we're really awkward and our kids perceive that it's awkward to us, that communicates messages that we might not want to communicate about sex. So ages 3 to 5, what's important to cover? Just a few bullet points here. Number 1, God made you and God made your body. You didn't just come out of some primordial ooze. You are a created in the image of God, and you're special. God made every part of your body. There is no bad part. Boys and girls are different, and they're not just different with their body parts. Boys and girls think different. They have, as a general rule, they have some different interests. Not every guy and every girl falls into that. We talked a lot about that last night. But girls generally, guys generally, because we are different. God made us different. And thank God he made us different. We'll talk more about that tonight. Define appropriate touch in various settings. It is okay if you go to the doctor and there's a hurt in a private area, it's okay for the doctor to see that part of your body because the doctor is there to help you. But if a babysitter says, hey, pull your pants down, I want to see a private part of your body, that's not okay. And if that happens, come and tell us as soon as you can. So we're arming them with what do I do in response to that. And again, that's a benefit of the book is the book does that. I don't have to come up with different ways. The goal is feel good about the body. No body shame. There's no part of my body that to me just feels bad. Ages 6 to 9, they're ready for more information. So we do the basics of sexuality. We need a definition. What is sex? Well, there are different sexual behaviors, but what is sex? Sex is not just a behavior. It's sexuality. It's this whole part of life, and every person experiences it. And sexual interest, Why is it that at some point I'm drawn to boys or girls, and I think of them in a different way, and I get these different feelings inside of me, and here I am, a 10-year-old boy, and a girl walks in, and I think she's cute, and something inside of me starts to feel different, and that's normal. But I need to be prepared for that and understand why those kinds of things happen. Where do babies come from? They don't come from Walmart. They don't come from a stork. They come from a mom and a dad. And they come from both. My mom doesn't just have a baby by herself. There is a male somewhere who's responsible for half of that. Basic anatomy. God's part in the family. From the time you are conceived until the time you die, God is involved in every part of our life. And this is a part of our life God's involved in because God made this. And it's a good thing. Basically, satisfy curiosity. Because if their curiosity is satisfied, then they're not looking for other places to go to try to fill in those gaps that didn't get filled in at home. Ages 10 to 13, by the time we're preparing for that middle school experience, so we're wrapping up elementary school, we're in that tweens category. I want to be an adult. I'm only 12, but I sure wish I was an adult. I might start acting like I was an adult. If you've ever raised a 12-year-old, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Somewhere around 12 or 13, moms and dads just become stupid idiots. And then around age 25 to 30, it's amazing how mom and dad recovered all their intellect. Y'all do follow what I'm saying, right? Okay. Concept of purity, not just virginity. Now, again, tonight we'll get into the theology of sex, and I'm a firm believer that God's plan for sexuality is that there is no sexual encounter or sexual experience until marriage. That's the bullseye on the target. That's what God planned sex to be about. We'll talk a lot more about that tonight. But if the only thing I stress is virginity, what happens if I make a bad choice? Or what happens if somebody else makes a bad choice? What happens if somebody forces me to do something sexually? If the only thing that's ever been stressed to me is I have to be a virgin until I get married, what happens if I'm a 10-year-old girl and mom's boyfriend sexually abuses me? Well, what does that do to my concept of my worth and how good I am or how okay I am? So we need to stress the concept of purity because nobody can take away your purity. It is impossible for somebody to rob you of your purity. Your purity in God's eyes is something that you are in control of. Nobody can take it from you. And so if the concept, and if I am let's say I'm a 14-year-old, and man, I'm a 14-year-old girl, and I really like this guy, and so I make a choice to do something sexually, and then I wish I hadn't done that. Well, if purity is what I'm striving for, I can make that right with God in a heartbeat, and then move on from there as though nothing has happened from a spiritual standpoint. Now, I'm not disputing the fact that emotionally, mentally, there's going to be some work I may have to do to work through that, but from a spiritual standpoint, instantly I am pure in God's eyes again. But if the only thing I've ever heard is virginity, well, I can't just be a virgin again. And so stress the concept of purity. Inform about changes in puberty before they happen. It can be scary, frightening for my body to start to do things, and nobody has told me about that before it happens. Talked to a number of adult females who they began menstruation, but nobody had talked to them about it, and they didn't know what in the world was going on. I've talked to guys who their body has done things, and they didn't know that was what was going, what's happening. One little tidbit: it's totally normal for a teenage guy when they're going through puberty to get a hard lump under one or both nipples. That's just a normal part of body development. So Griffin, my youngest, came home one day. He was probably 14, 15. He was in high school. He said, "Hey, Dad, guess what?" And he called his buddy's name. "Guess what so-and-so told me today?" "I don't know, Griffin, what did he tell you?" He was talking about he thinks he has cancer because he's got this hard knot under one of his nipples. And he said, "My dad told me about that, and it's just normal." And his buddy was like, "Whew, I thought I had cancer. I'm glad to hear that." So it can be really helpful to just know things are going to happen. My voice is going to change. I'm going to grow hair in places I haven't grown hair before. If I'm a girl, I'm going to have a menstrual cycle that starts, and that happens earlier and earlier and earlier. So if you're thinking, yeah, that might happen by 14 or 15, let's drop that back to maybe 10, 11, by 12. It is not uncommon for a 10-year-old girl to start developing from a physical way. So inform before they happen. And then sex is a gift from God. Sex is a good thing. Sex is not dirty, bad. It's a good thing. But God wants us to use it in a right way. In that time of life, we need to hit all the major areas. Dating, flirting, peer pressure. How do I handle that? In today's culture, we need to have definitions of words. What is porn? What is sex? What is gay or lesbian or homosexual? Because kids are hearing this and they're talking about it and they're doing all kinds of research on the internet about it. And if they're moving into that 6th, 7th grade period of life and we have not been there to give them information, they are going to fill that blank in if it hasn't already been filled in. And to borrow a quote from another speaker, Christopher Ewan, if you are not the first with information, you're too late. I totally agree with that. We need to be the first one. There's this concept of primacy. Whatever the brain hears as truth first, I accept that as my default. That's true. And then everything else gets filtered through that. So if misinformation or a lie is accepted first as truth, it is really hard to undo that because I'm convinced that's true. If you've ever done work like you tried to pull the door panel off of an automobile, they've got these ribbed rivets, these plastic things that, man, it's about impossible. Once those things go in, it's really hard to get them out without doing damage. That's what truth is like, or a lie. Whatever the first thing in there, it's designed to stay in there. It's not designed to have to come out. So I want to be the first one with truth, especially around sexuality, so that my kids are ready to navigate this culture that they live in. Guys, you did not make the culture you're having to grow up in. You are not responsible for how broken our world is when it comes to sexuality. But you've got no choice but to live in that world. You are stuck with it. You've got to figure out ways to navigate all the landmines that are out there. And my heart does bleed for you that you are living in such a messed up culture. You're not the first generation to grow up in a messed up culture around sexuality. Kids who were growing up in Corinth in New Testament times were living in a way more messed up culture sexually than what we have. But there's still a lot of brokenness out there. So begin early, be consistent, share accurate information. And the emphasis on share, don't withhold, share it. There's another speaker, her name is Mary Flo Ridley, and she has this great lesson. I wish I'd come up with it. She talks about the brain as like a sponge. Said, we used to think as parents that she and her husband were the guardians of the sponge. We don't want to let any information about sex get into our little child's mind and contaminate their mind. He said, but we rethought that. And we decided instead of being the guardians of the sponge to try to keep information out, we need to be the ones who pour information into that sponge, not like all at one time, but just a drip, drip, drip approach with the thought, once the sponge is full, then other information, it just rolls right off. I love that analogy. I'm big on object lessons. And I think it's a great visual that's easy to wrap my brain around. So if I pour truth in, then when misinformation comes along, it just goes right off. But if I have withheld information, they'll soak in anything that they're exposed to. Provide safe, nurturing touch and affection. We all crave touch. Healthy, nurturing, comforting touch. Little child runs around, falls down, skins their knee. What do they want? They want somebody to hold them and console them. That's normal. If a child is born into this world and doesn't receive nurturing touch, they'll likely die. Marasmus. The lack of physical nurturing touch, very, very early age, can lead to death. We are wired that we need that. And so if you as a mom or a dad are not providing safe, nurturing, affirming touch, hey, that 12-year-old girl is going to be starved for that kind of affection, and she will settle for anybody who's willing to provide it, no matter how messed up of a teenage or older guy that is. Same thing with guys. So moms, you're in a great position to be the affirming person who shows respect to that young man who is growing up in your house. Dads, same thing. You get to be the ones who provide the hugs, the safe touch, because everybody needs that. And if you're a little girl growing up in a family where dad isn't safe and dad's touch is forceful or dad's touch is harmful, or even emotionally dad's words are degrading and harmful and unsafe, you are primed for a huge struggle. So parents provide the safety and the nurturing affirmation that our kids need. Be a sexually healthy parent. I'm going to show a clip. Do we have sound ready to go on the video here? I'm going to show a clip from Dr. Jim Burns. He's the author of the 2 books I mentioned, director of Homeward Ministries. By the way, Homeward is a great resource for parents. They have a daily radio program that's also available as a podcast. If you're not familiar with Homeward, and again, it's Homeword, Homeward. Just be aware that they're a great resource from a Christian parenting standpoint. But let me show you a clip, and then I'll follow it up for a second.
Well, a lot of times, the reason that parents can't talk to their kids in a healthy manner is because they haven't, frankly, dealt with their own sexuality. You know what the number one question is that parents ask me at seminars? Well, if I've been sexually active, or if I was sexually active when I was young, do I tell my kids? And, you know, there's kind of a debate on that, frankly. Some people would say, absolutely not, don't tell your kids. I tend to go the other way and say, you know what, in a right moment, I wouldn't give every gory detail, but I would say the reason I'm passionate about this is because there was some pain in my life because I made some improper decisions. Nevertheless, whatever the issue is with your sexuality, when we talk to our kids about sexuality, it brings up all kinds of things within our own life. So many times, because of our past, because of past experiences, or because of the way we were brought up, we have trouble dealing with talking about sexuality because we really haven't built that theology of sexuality in our own life. So what I want to say to you today is that if you are struggling with your own sexuality, for whatever reason, get help. There is help. The Bible says that the man or woman who seeks counsel will get wisdom. The man or woman who does not seek counsel will not get the wisdom. Today, we have great books and resources that can help you through your own sexuality, and in doing that, you can pass a legacy of healthy sexuality onto your children.
So in the spring of 2002, I finally sought help for what had been a lifelong struggle with sexual addiction. I didn't know that's what it was until spring of 2002, but it was there before earliest memory. By age 4 to 5, it was already there. Acting out behaviors were already there. I have no real memory of life before it. But before recovery, Griffin would have been probably 2 or 3 years old. We're walking through the checkout line at Walmart in Greensboro, North Carolina. He looks over at a magazine cover and he says, "Dad, do you think she's pretty?" Again, this is before recovery. So I've got huge shame and secrecy, and that just tapped right into that landmine of shame inside of me. And so I just kind of, that kind of reaction, I didn't say anything. Didn't even acknowledge really that he'd asked. I just kind of, deer in the headlights. I couldn't even acknowledge, is it okay to notice that, hey, that lady's an attractive lady. Yeah, she's pretty. If I had been anywhere near halfway healthy in that moment, I could have said, yeah, Griffin, I think she's really pretty. What do you think? It would have been an easy, just a quick conversation. But because there was so much hidden in my world, it just made me totally shut down and unable to respond in that moment. So again, same page that Dr. Burns is on. As a parent, if there's something going on in my world from a sexual standpoint that is not okay, or if I've got a sexual past, maybe there's sexual abuse in my past and I've never dealt with it, it's going to be very hard to have healthy conversation with my kids and that stuff not leak out into how I am emotionally or what's coming out in my voice. Because what should be a fairly normal conversation that doesn't need a lot of emotion suddenly becomes high emotionally charged conversation because all of my stuff from back there is finding a way to leak out. I use the term leak out sideways. This is not the object of all this emotional energy, but in the moment it's becoming the object, where the object should be over here, but my kid is becoming the object. A very wise teacher once said, hey, take the big huge log out of your own eye, and then there's a so that you can see clearly how to remove the speck of dust out of your brother's eye. I think it's a great spiritual truth that applies to this topic. Let me deal with my own sexual baggage so that I'll be a healthy parent, a sexually healthy parent, and I can help my kids have a a healthy approach to sexuality. So things to keep in mind. Number one, your child might be struggling with something related to sex. Just because you don't know that they are doesn't mean they're not. I hear that over and over. I was presenting at Lipscomb University one time for their summer celebrations. It was adults, but I had a parent and a friend walk in, and I overheard the conversation, and the mom was saying, my kids are homeschooled. I know my son is with me all the time. I know where he is at all times. I know he's never looked at porn. And I heard that conversation. So in the presentation, I tried to very gently challenge that position. Just because you don't know it doesn't mean it's not there. Well, I got home, and about 2 weeks later, I get this email. It was her. Dear Steve, never thought I'd be sending an email like this. When I got home, I took your advice. I talked to my 12-year-old, and he immediately burst out in tears. He's been struggling with porn for 2 years. Just because I don't know it doesn't mean it's not there. Just because I don't know that somebody has hurt one of my children sexually doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It just means it's not on the radar yet. And I'm not saying it's happened to everybody. I'm just saying be aware. It's possible that even though you don't know it, something might be there. And so everything that we say, everything that we talk about, run that through the filter of I don't know what is going on in my child when we're talking about this, because there are things that I just might not know. Punishment's not a solution. So I find my 12-year-old looking at porn on their phone, and I take the phone away for a week, and I say, if you ever do this again, I'll take it away for 3 months. That's not going to fix anything, because fear is not going to prohibit inappropriate sexual behavior. Good grief, the world is full of people who have lost major stuff. I worked with if I said the name, you'd all know him. Has an international ministry. Looks at porn. Knows that all it would take is one person discovering what he's doing. And his reputation, his ministry, it's toast. But he still looks at porn. He even got an alert one time on his computer that he thought it was the FBI monitoring what he was doing. And that scared him, which is why he and I were having the conversation. But then a week later, he's back to looking at porn. Fear of my world falling apart doesn't stop the behavior. Do I really think that fear of losing a phone is going to stop the behavior? That's not what's driving the behavior. So I'm not saying that punishment is never appropriate in addressing inappropriate behavior. I'm just saying punishment itself is never going to be the solution to it. If you don't have a good, open, safe relationship already, it's going to be very hard to address this. So I might need to take a step back. Say, hey, if we can't even just talk about homework and responsibilities and cleaning the room and all that kind of normal stuff, if we can't have that conversation and it go well, I sure don't expect that a conversation around sexuality is going to go well. So I might have to take a step back and do some relational repair. Hey, what is going on that our relationship is so volatile? We got to fix this. So we may need a third party to help us figure out what's going on and be able to address that in a healthy way. Because threats and bullying tactics as a parent are not going to produce a healthy relationship that we can talk about sexuality in a good way. Can learn a lot about sex from a can of Pringles. Anybody here like potato chips? Nobody, not when you put it in that context, no. Okay, just like potato chips. So there we go. Quick hands, and now you don't have to eat them all right now or anything like that, but if you would just open up and try one, make sure they're nice and fresh, and that's not, but the can says Pringles. But the can says Pringles, and there's a potato chip on the outside, like a smiling potato chip on the outside of the can, right? So it's got to be Pringles on the inside because the can says Pringles. So what, you said it's chocolate. So what is inside? Yeah, it's just little mini Oreos. Do you like little mini Oreos, by the way? Yes. So are you okay with what you have? Okay. So I'm a little disappointed, but I like what's in there. Okay. We do that. Okay, so here's the word on the street. America's #1 snack is, anybody know? Best-selling snack. Potato chips. Yeah, America's #1 best-selling snack is potato chips. The little Oreo cookies were afraid they were going to be left all alone on the shelf in the store. And they didn't want to be left all alone on the shelf in the store. So they hid in the Pringles. They disguised themselves as Pringles, hoping somebody would take them home. And I'm just saying, we do that. We all, I don't care what age you're, we all do that. We hide parts of ourselves that we think people will reject or that they won't like, and we present the part of us that we think people are going to like. Sometimes we even misrepresent ourselves. We intentionally cover up parts and we pretend to be something we're not because we want somebody's approval or acceptance. Our kids certainly do that. They hide parts or hide behaviors that they think are going to get them in trouble or that are going to be met with less than an embrace, and just don't want anybody to find out that they're there. And certainly that happens around sexual stuff. So let me recognize the fact that there is just a natural thing in all people, regardless of age, where the natural tendency is to hide struggles. So let me do the best that I can to lay a foundation or create an environment where my kids are more likely to disclose if there's a struggle or if there's something painful in the past. So I avoid comments that are judgmental in nature. So if I'm walking through Walmart and I'm an adult male and my 14-year-old daughter is with me and we're in Walmart and we see a pregnant teenage girl, I'm not going to say anything that could be a judgmental comment or a harsh comment or something that would communicate to my daughter, ooh, I better never end up like that, or my dad will throw me out of the house or scream at me or punish me or whatever. So I might make a comment like, wow, I bet this is going to be really hard for her. Because I do bet that is hard for a teenage girl, whether they want to be pregnant or not. I bet it is hard for a teenage girl in today's culture. There are a lot of challenges there. That's not a harsh comment. It's a compassionate, an understanding comment. But when I say things like that, if that's just my life pattern, that my kids always hear, man, I empathize with, if I can, or at least I express sympathy for people who are in tough situations, that I'm a safe person, I'm understanding, and I'm here to try to help people. They're so much more likely to come share something that may be the deepest, darkest, most hurtful thing in their life. They're more likely to share that if that's what they've seen from us and that's what they expect of us. To responding in a supportive way. In other words, actively paint the picture of what they should expect from you. Again, if this is not congruent with the rest of how you act, this won't work at all. So if you yell and scream and throw fits and they never know what you is going to come in the door, you're going to come in the door and give them a hug or come in the door and slap them. If they don't know, there is no way in the world they're likely to come and want to share anything with you. But if you can consistently be who you need to be as a parent and paint the picture of what they can expect from you. By the way, if you are ever struggling in anything, whether it's sex or not, if you're ever struggling with something, here's what you should expect from me. Number one, I'll listen. I will do my best to just listen and try to understand what it's like for you. Try to understand what's going on. I may ask some questions to try to understand better, but it's not going to be an inquisition. It's not going to be a grilling like 20 questions. I'm going to try to understand. And I commit to do the best I can not to have a big emotional response. Now, I'm not promising. I'm committing to do the best I can. Because if I promise something and then I don't follow through, that just makes it even worse. And more likely that they won't want to come talk again. So paint the picture of what they should expect or can expect from you. Let me go back to one point before we move forward on that, the importance of sharing information. Kids talk. You got a 10-year-old, 12-year-old go over and spend the night with somebody else. Kids talk. And at this point, everybody's got cell phones, and kids watch YouTube videos and share videos and this and that, and et cetera, et cetera. When Savannah, we have 4 kids, 3 boys, 1 girl, boy, boy, girl, boy. Savannah, when she was 9, it wasn't this book, but it was a similar book. It was the baby book. I think it was the God's Design for Sex series. And when Savannah was about 9 years old, and I was the tucker-inner, so every night, Daddy, if I was at home, I was the one tucking him in. So we typically would read when took him into bed. Daddy, can we read the baby book? For a year, almost every night, we read the baby book over and over. I tell you, Savannah knew more about healthy sexuality and the basics of where babies and how, knew more about that than most adults know from a physical like biology class standpoint. Well, we started to hear back, from Savannah's friends' parents, that when the kids are all getting together and somebody says something, Savannah has become the corrector. She's become, no, that's not true. It's this way. And so we had to have a conversation with Savannah, kind of rein that in a little bit. Hey, Savannah, listen, I am so glad that you know this stuff, but I don't know that so-and-so's parents are really comfortable with you being the one to be kind of the one to address all of that. I think the parents probably should be the ones to address that. But given the two extremes, either she knows nothing, and so she's soaking in all this stuff that the friends are talking about, or she's already learned way more than that, and so she becomes the, no, that's not true, it's like this. I'll take that any day over the other one. But again, I want to reinforce the value of sharing accurate information. If abuse is disclosed, there is a things to do and things not to do. So let's start off with the things not to do. Number one, don't press for details. The brain encodes traumatic events very differently than it does normal events. Normal memories are hippocampus. It's like a file drawer. They're just stored. You open up that file, 1929, and you go, well, most of you probably don't remember 1929. But anyway, I open up that drawer, and there we go, and what did you have for breakfast? And boom, it's just there, if it's retrievable. But the amygdala is the seat of emotional memory. And so in trauma, my brain is flooded with all kinds of stress hormones and cortisol, and the amygdala becomes the active piece here, and it doesn't store memories in any kind of orderly way. It's like a popcorn blower blowing popcorn around. It may be there, and this memory may be confused with that memory, and I think it's all happening at the same time, but it actually is like 3 years different, and there's just no way to know because the brain doesn't store that information in a nice, tidy way. And so it's totally normal for some details to just be off. So don't press for details because details are not needed in that moment. Now, there may be a time when we need to figure out with somebody who knows what they're doing, need to try to figure out as much detail as is possible to find out. But there should never be pressure to come up with detail. And so if in the moment you as a parent are hearing this information and boom, that has just triggered all kinds of emotion in you, and so now you're starting to grill, well, when and where and what, and they may not have any of that information, but they're perceiving they sure better come up with information in this moment or they're going to be even worse off, and so they're making up stuff. Now, let me go on record. It is not normal for children to make up stuff about sexual abuse, just as a default. But if I'm grilling them, it is normal for a child to make up stuff just to try to get out of that moment safely. So don't press for details. Details aren't needed right now. Don't express disbelief. Please do not express disbelief to someone who has just shared that they have been sexually abused. I hear stories, and there was one, we did an Ultimate Escape event, a bunch of different churches had their youth groups, and I got a question, my mom's boyfriend is sexually abusing me, how do I get his image out of my head? Well, I responded to the question after the Q&A session. The writer of the question turns out to be a 11-year-old girl. Come to find out, she had shared with her mom what was going on. Her mom slapped her and said, don't you ever say that again. That was how mom dealt with it. Now, it was about mom. It was definitely about mom's stuff. But no child or adult needs to hear when they're sharing with you that you don't believe them. So please don't do that to a child. Don't confront the abuser. That is not the time to jump in your pickup truck with your gun in the back and drive up to somebody's house, bang on the door, and, wait, we got to deal with this. Now, there may be a time to confront the abuser, but not in that way. But in the moment, your child needs to be the focus, not dealing with the abuser. Here's what we do need to do. Validate their courage to tell. Wow, I can only imagine how difficult that was for you to share. I can only imagine how hard that is for you to talk about. I am so proud of you for being able to talk about this. Thank you for being willing to tell me. Commit to do all you can. Again, don't overcommit. I can't promise I will never let that happen again. I can't promise that. I can't promise you'll never have to be around that person again. I don't know that I can guarantee that. But I want to commit what I can do. I will do my best to keep you safe. I will do my best so that you don't have to be in a position like that again. Get professional help immediately from somebody who knows sexual trauma. Please don't just go to the convenient counselor who's down the street or at a church nearby because you know their third cousin twice removed. Do due diligence and go to somebody who has training in sexual trauma, because that is a very unique area. If I'm having a cardiac issue, I'm not going to go to a podiatrist who lives next door. I go to somebody who knows what they're doing when it comes to cardiology. Reassure your children that nothing is too bad to deal with together. There's nothing that you have done. There's nothing you're struggling with. There's nothing that you have lived through that is so bad that we can't find a way to figure this out. Just a quick introduction to the things back on the table. When we finish up here, I'll head back to the back in case you want to grab some of these. We're not set up to sell product. We just do donations. And you really need to look at it like that you're making a donation to Ultimate Escape to this ministry, and we appreciate it. And thank you for your donation. Take what you need back there, donations. Suggested amounts are on the table. The God Made Your Body, How God Makes Babies, ages 3 to 5, 6 to 9. There is a book for parents, How Do I Have the Conversation? So whether you're a parent, grandparent, interested party in the life of a young person, how do I have the conversation? What do we talk about? What are they going to want to know? Angry Birds and Killer Bees. I continue to say, if every student walked into their first day of high school already having read this book, their experience for the next 4 years would be drastically different. Great information in the book, Hooked. Easy read. I hate to read. I don't read. I took it to the gym, read it in 3 days, just in between sets. It is an easy read, great information. And then most of our major presentations are available on DVDs. There are 3 different DVDs back there. This presentation right here that we're doing, talking to children about sex. And then tonight, the fun theology of sex. That's on volume 1. The 2 we did last night are on volume 2. And what you're going to see for our sermon with Legend is on volume 3. Speaking of Legend, hey Legend, let me introduce you for just a quick second to this puppy dog Legend. Legend, you've done a great job of laying there and sleeping. Come. Good girl. Good girl. Come. I just want to show you some of the things that Legend can do, and we're going to talk a lot more about this in the sermon time. Legend, sit. Good girl. Here you go. You can get it. Say, oh, it is it's a her favorite snack is clementines. I never would have thought a dog and fruit, but she loves the clement. There you go. Good catch. Good girl. Legend, down. But I was just laying down and you told me to get up. Seriously, are you serious? Good girl. There you go. Oops. Hold on. I forgot to pull this off. That will be a little easier. Okay. Good girl. Legend, come. Good girl. There you go. Good girl. Legend, stay. Good stay. Good girl. Ready? Good girl. Get it. Oh, there you go. Get it. Good girl. Good girl. Okay, Legend, stay. Ready? Get it. Good catch. Good girl. All right, Legend, speak. Good girl. A little louder. Speak. 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 She's got this indoor voice. I don't know. She just lays down. She will not speak unless she lays down first. I have no idea where that came from. Good girl. Legend, back. Legend, okay, back. Good girl. Good girl. There you go. Good girl. Okay. Hey, Legend. Easy. Easy. Good job. Good girl. Good job. It's okay to clap for her. Good. Now, lest you think, well, a clementine's a pretty big piece of fruit. That's not all that great. Legend, easy. Good girl. Good job. Good puppy. Okay. So Legend is a pretty obedient girl. I had to fly her to Canada to speak for a youth event in Regina, Canada, back in November. It's the first time she flew, so I was kind of nervous as to how she's going to go through security. She did great. Even one of the flights, there was an empty seat next to me, and they were okay with her sitting, so she literally sat in the seat next to me the entire flight. TSA agents were very complimentary, so she did exactly what she needed to do. But I guarantee you, when I first got Legend at 16 months, this is not the dog that we had at 16 months. So I'm going to share a lot more about that, and we'll talk about the power of transformation and connection. But I did want you to get a chance to see kind of how far Legend has come, because the rest of the story will make a lot more sense if you've had an idea of, okay, this is kind of where this dog is. So thank you guys very much. I'm going to move to the back. We got a little break here between now and the time worship service starts.